Cannot believe I broke another ESC, and this time it took my flight controller with it. I have to start buying something a little more cost effective. Let's see, how much money do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, $11. That's it. That's all I got. How can there be two of them? It's 2022. The SpeedyBee F405 V3 stack shown in this video was sent to me by SpeedyBee. However, I have not received any form of compensation, monetary or otherwise, to give my opinion on it. Nobody other than myself has had any editorial control over the content of this video. The TMotor stack shown in this video was not provided by TMotor. I procured that myself, thus it needs no explanation. Hey everybody, I'm Bacon Ninja, and no, nothing we're going to talk about today actually cost $11. But that doesn't mean there aren't actual options on the market today in 2022 for budget stacks. And by stack, I mean a flight controller and an ESC combo. Now, for most of my builds back there on the wall, the stacks run something like $120. In some cases more than that, especially on my daily driver, which is my perfect freestyle build. That's about $130 SpeedyBee stack. But are there options out on the market right now that are any good that cost around 70 bucks? You know, something reasonable. Yep, there sure are. We have the TMotor Velox F411 Lite, and we have the SpeedyBee F405 V3. Today we're going to look at both of these budget stacks and see how they compare and talk about which one you might actually want to buy, because they have very different feature sets. They are from two name brand manufacturers. There are a couple more on this list that are from less known manufacturers, and we're not going to include those because I feel like these are really the contenders out there on the market right now. They're highly available in most stores, they have the majority of feature sets, and they're by well-known companies that you can actually get a hold of if you need support. TMotor and SpeedyBee. So let's dive into these things and see what budget stacks are all about in 2022 and which one of these ranks the king of budget stacks by the end of this video. So in one corner, we have the TMotor Velox F411 Lite. This stack is coming in at $76.90 US. It uses 30.5 by 30.5 mounting patterns. Although the ESC mounts at 30.5 by 30.5, the flight controller actually has the option of 20 by 20. But if you want to mount it as a stack, you're going to have to use the 30.5 by 30.5 because of the ESC in this box. It comes in at 18.3 grams with the flight controller and ESC. And in the box, you get the flight controller, ESC, gummies, an ESC harness, an XT60 lead, and a capacitor. And in the other corner, we have the SpeedyBee F405 V3. This stack comes in at $69.99 US, is yet again a 30.5 by 30.5 mounting pattern. It weighs 23.4 grams with the flight controller and ESC, and in the box you will find the flight controller, ESC, gummies, an ESC harness, an XT60 lead, a capacitor, as well as a DJI harness, stack screws, stack nuts, and extra O-rings. And this stack doesn't have any other mounting options between the flight controller and the ESC. It's all 30.5 by 30.5. But that's just the base overview. Let's break it down to the individual components of these kits, the flight controller and the ESC. Let's take them to the bench cam so I can show you in a little bit more detail. And let's go over all of the features in both of these things. And in the box for this flight controller, you'll find obviously some stickers. TMotor is always sending out them stickers. And then you get the actual flight controller in here. Nice padding they've got going on. Let me try to get it out of this thing. All right, there's the top side of the flight controller. You can see the MCU here. You can see the gyro up here. The MCU on this board is an F411, which does mean that it has a slower clock speed than the F405 that's going to be on the SpeedyBee, and it has a few less UARTs. And we'll go over that here in a minute, but just remember this is an F411 board. And the gyro is going to be a BMI 270, which is super commonplace in today's flight controller market. If we flip it over, you can see there is a buck converter here, and that is a 5-volt 2-amp BEC on here. You can see the OSD chip on the bottom. This does have an OSD chip. You can see that it has a micro USB port. The boot button is up here on top. And then we have quite a few pads on the top for soldering to, not any pads on the bottom. So this is a top-only solder job. And then we have the ESC connector here on the end. Pretty basic flight controller. And just a couple of other things to note about this flight controller, it does only have 2 UARTs broken out to pads available to you for use. It is an F411 processor, so there is a limited amount of UARTs that you can actually use on this MCU. That is to be expected with an F411. It does have an SDA and SCL port if you're using a GPS with a compass, so that is good to know. But yeah, you're limited to 2 UARTs. There is an S-Bus inversion pad if you need that for FrSky or something. If you're still flying FrSky, please stop flying FrSky and go with Express LRS. But as long as you're not planning on running too many peripherals, this F411 can get the job done for you. Let's see what else comes in the box with this thing. And rounding it off, we just have a selection of gummies, some tall, some short, and then you have the harness for the ESC, which they are pairing this with the Lite ESC, so it's already pinned out for that. And then at the bottom, you have a nice wiring diagram, some documentation, so you don't got to look it up online, because the bane of every FPV pilot's existence is looking up a diagram on the internet. All right, let's take a look at the SpeedyBee F405 V3 and see how it compares to the TMotor right out of the box. And taking a look at the SpeedyBee, we can see it has the MCU here, and we have the gyro back here. Now the gyro is the same, it is the BMI 270. However, the MCU is the F405. So that does mean we have more UARTs available to us on this board. And actually there are 4 broken out UARTs with, again, 1 inverted S-Bus pad if you need it, working off of one of those UARTs. But with this board, you do have 4 available to you. We also have the OSD chip, which we expect. We have a USB-C instead of the micro USB. It does come with the gummies pre-installed, which I think is kind of a nice addition if you're into having that done for you. It has this cutout in the front in case your camera is going to come close to the flight controller. It allows you to have a little more angle in the front, and it makes up for that in the back. It has a ton of broken out pads. It does also include the SDA and SCL pads if you're going to run a GPS with a compass. On this side, we can see we have a Bluetooth antenna, which is really nice. This has a wireless connectivity. We have a light indicator for battery voltage, 25, 50, 75, and 100%. We have breakout pads for the LEDs on the corners. And on the bottom, we see a couple of buck converters. And one of these is a 5-volt 2-amp regulator. The other one is a 9-volt 2-amp regulator, which does mean that this board will natively support a DJI Vista. We'll get into that here in a minute, but this does support the Vista natively without having to solder or run a separate BEC like you would have to do with the TMotor board. Continuing to look down here, we have an SD card for the flash. Since this does not appear to have any onboard flash, it has an SD card instead. We have the ESC harness down here, and up here we have what looks to be a breakout for all of the DJI connectivity in a pin connector. And as far as what comes with the F405 V3 in the box, I'm gonna wait to cover that because this kit came as an ESC and flight controller combo, so the parts are all in one package together, whereas the TMotor had a separate box for the ESC. It's actually a 2-piece kit. So everything is in one bag in this one, and I'll just cover it all when we talk about the ESCs here in a minute. But before we get into specs on those ESCs, let me go over a couple more differences with you between the F411 Lite and the F405 V3. The F405 V3 actually has the capability to run 8 motors, where the F411 Lite can only do 4. It does have 4 of them pinned into the harness on this 405, but there are 4 more pads that you can solder to if for some reason you wish to run another ESC and you want to do like an X8 setup or a hexacopter. That'd be an octocopter, not a hexacopter. Why would it be a hexacopter if it has 8? I guess you could do a hexacopter and just not use 2 of them. But if you want to do any funny business, the F405 V3 will actually get you there, where the F411 Lite will not. It's up to you if you really need something like that. Also, the F405 V3 does have a barometer on board, so if you want to run iNav, it should be compatible with iNav, where the F411, again, does not. The F405 V3 also has the native DJI port and a 9-volt 2-amp BEC to support running a Vista off of, where again, the F411 does not. It only has a 5-volt 2-amp BEC, no 9-volt BEC, and even if you wanted to wire up everything to a Vista, you can't power it off of that 5-volt BEC because that's outside of the Vista's power range, especially at the 2-amp output power of this BEC. Now they both do have OSD chips, which is nice if you're planning on running analog, which I am planning on running analog with these boards when I purchase something in this price range. Black box is a little bit different. There is an 8 megabyte black box chip on the F411 Lite, where there is just an SD card on the SpeedyBee F405 V3. And as far as extra features go, it's really hands down for the 405 V3. It has the battery voltage indicator. It has a TVS diode actually on board of the flight controller, not just on the ESC. There's also one on the ESC, we will get there. But I didn't see anything like that on the F411 Lite. I did go over all the surface mount components and make sure that maybe it was just not in their marketing material. I didn't actually find one on this board, but not that it really matters too much. There is a TVS diode on here, you know, just for grins. And as far as LED connectivity goes, they both do have LED pads for Betaflight configured LEDs. However, the F405 V3 also has pads around all the corners. There's a pad set for LEDs around all 4 corners, and you can run the built-in SpeedyBee LED controller, which just works off of the boot button here. After the flight controller is powered on, you just hit the boot button to change colors. It's nothing fancy, but it will get you up in a hurry with LEDs, and you don't have to worry about configuring them in Betaflight. You can still run LEDs just fine on this board if you have a BEC to support the extra amp draw, and you feel like configuring them in Betaflight. And you can also configure them in Betaflight on the SpeedyBee F405 V3 if you want to go down that rabbit hole. I've never been a fan of running LEDs on my builds outside of what I have to mandatorily for night flights. So if you are, it might be a consideration between these two here. So now it is time to talk about ESCs. And when we talk about budget stacks and ESCs, a lot of things come to mind. Primarily, fire. Fire comes to mind because you think if it's a cheap ESC, then you're probably going to catch the thing on fire. Well, let me tell you something about both of these ESCs. I have never had a problem with either of them running them pretty hard. They do have regular size FETs in both instances. So, you know, for budget stacks, I would say the reliability is there in both corners. Now, when we look at the specs of them, they are both rated at 55 amps for burst. The TMotor is the TMotor V45A is what comes in the Lite kit. It is rated for a 55 amp burst at 10 seconds, where the SpeedyBee BLS50A, which is what comes in the F405 V3 kit, is rated for a 55 amp burst at 5 seconds. So 5 more seconds on the rating for the TMotor than the SpeedyBee, but in the real world, I have not found either to be a limiting factor. The SpeedyBee lists this board at 50 amps, nominal amperage, and TMotor lists this one at 45 amps, nominal amperage. They are both rated for 3 to 6S, and this one has a TVS diode on board, where this one does not. Now let's get them under the camera so I can show you some small differences about what it might be like to work with these individually, because I think the pad layout is going to be a thing that is a concern for me when I would pick one of these boards. And let's start by looking at this one with the SpeedyBee F405 V3. You can see the pads are over here on the edges. Pretty standard looking pads. It's not a dual-sided pad. It is a one-sided pad. There are FETs right under where the pad is going to be on the bottom here. So you wouldn't want to dual-side it because the FETs go out to the edge a little bit further on this end. What I like about these is that the copper is actually laid under this mask here. So when you go to lay a bead, this white line kind of naturally stops the solder and makes a nice rounded bead on this pad. And there's plenty of room between that and where the FETs are soldered up here, which I kind of like. It also has all the pads between the 2 holes for the posts. And, you know, of course, you don't have a double-sided, so if you like to solder to the bottom, you're out. On the connector, we actually have breakout pads. If for some reason you had to solder it on instead of use the plug, it already exists. They're real small, but you can use them. And again, on the bottom, full-size FETs. As well on the bottom, this is the TVS diode that they're including on the board. So there's an extra TVS diode on the ESC as well as the flight controller. And both of these do come with caps. The SpeedyBee has a 1500 low ESR and the TMotor has 1000 low ESR. I'll show you them here in a second, but let's look at the pad layout on this TMotor real quick compared to what I just showed you on the SpeedyBee. And TMotor has really done their best to put all of the FETs on the bottom. So all of the FETs running the motors are completely on the bottom of the board. You do have double-sided pads on this, which it is nice if you want to have an option to solder to the bottom or the top. As far as the connector here, it doesn't have any pinned breakouts. If you break the connector, you'd better hope you have these leads still on it to solder to, but you know, if that's happening, you're probably doing some other damage too. There's no TVS diode on here that I could find. I tried to identify some of the parts, especially this one down here, but that looks too small to me to be a TVS diode, so I doubt that is one at all. The thing I don't like here is that they put a pad outside of the standoff stack screws. I don't like that because I feel like if I solder this, there's a real good chance that I might accidentally bridge it to this ring here. And then I'm going to be putting power into my stack screw, potentially, if it wears a little bit, or I'm going to be grounding out a motor post. I really don't like that. I don't like that at all. I feel kind of fishy soldering outside of the screw holes here, especially when they're so close to the copper ring for the screw hole. It also means that this is longer than the 30x30 mounting. And if we set the SpeedyBee on top of it, you can see it's not a horrible amount of difference in length, but it's almost the whole pad's difference in length in all the corners for a 30.5 by 30.5 mounting. And that's why I think you're actually going to have a little easier time soldering on the SpeedyBee than the TMotor ESC. There are dual pads on the TMotor ESC, which is nice if you want to solder to the bottom, but I never solder to the bottom. And I really don't like soldering that far out to the edge around a hole like that. I just don't like it. Plus there's not a lot of meat where the hole is laid out because they tried to put so many fets on the bottom here that you might have that break off at some point and then your ESC might wiggle a bit. It's kind of unlikely, but it's possible. Whereas on the SpeedyBee, everything's laid out in a more traditional way, and they do have those stops for the solder so you get nice beads. At the end of the day, I'd rather solder to this than the TMotor one, but that's a personal preference of mine. Anyway, let's look at what comes in the box for both of these things. And remember, for the TMotor, it will be a combination of what was in the box for the flight controller and the ESC, whereas for the SpeedyBee, it'll be everything that comes in the box for both because it was a kit. And with the TMotor, we got obviously an XT60 lead, as well as the standard 2 sizes of gummies and another ESC cable, just in case you didn't get it with the flight controller that already came with one. And there's our 1000 microfarad 35 volt capacitor. So pretty basic kit, but that's what you would expect from a budget kit. Why would you expect anything more than that from a budget kit? Well, let's take a look at what comes with the SpeedyBee, and maybe you'll notice. And you can see in the SpeedyBee box, we get quite a few more things. Firstly, we get an XT60 lead. That's totally normal. We got that on the other one. But then we also get this harness bag, and then we get a short connector for the ESC to flight controller, but we also get a DJI port for connecting a Vista. If you want to just natively connect a Vista and use the black DJI remote, you can do that without any soldering on this board. We also get another bag where we have a couple of extra standoffs because they were already pre-installed in the ESC, so they didn't give us a whole other set, they just gave us some extras. As well as a 1500 microfarad 35 volt capacitor, a couple of heat shrink tubes in case you need to cover the legs on those. We also get a full set of stack screws and a full set of nylon nuts for the stack screws. In fact, we get more than a full set. They give us an extra one of each just in case we lose them. And I think that is actually a really nice touch. Now remember, when I first showed you both of these at the beginning, I said the price. And do you remember which one was cheaper? The SpeedyBee. The SpeedyBee was cheaper. The one with more features and with more accessories in the box that allows you to do more things with a budget stack is actually a few dollars cheaper than the TMotor. That's crazy, right? It's not that crazy, in all honesty. A little bit of what you're paying for on TMotor is who makes their ESCs, which is a really good manufacturer. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to name them, but I do have a theory as to who's making ESCs for TMotor. And SpeedyBee, I don't know who's making their stuff, but it's really good. I think they're just selling it at a lower price point because they're just a smaller market share at the moment. And they're trying to get their stuff out there. And this is a really, really good product. So when it comes down to picking between the F405 V3 or the TMotor Velox F411 stack, which one would I pick? I would pick the SpeedyBee all day, every day. The fact that I can control everything with my phone without busting out a cable is nice, although I don't always use that. You could technically do the same thing with the F411 from TMotor and just plug a cable in and use it over OTG on your phone, technically. But if you own an iPhone, you're not doing that. With a SpeedyBee, you can do it over Bluetooth, so it doesn't matter what kind of phone you use, or if it's a tablet that doesn't have an Android app store that you can get the SpeedyBee app in. It doesn't matter at all. You can just go download the file from SpeedyBee's website, load it on your tablet, hit it with Bluetooth, and don't worry if you have OTG or not on your phone or tablet or anything else that runs the SpeedyBee app. Let me tell you a secret. If you're not using the SpeedyBee app to do things in the field, you are missing out. you should be using the SpeedyBee app. Just go download it and see if it works. See if you have OTG. If you don't have OTG, just get one of those little adapters. I carry 3 cables and an OTG adapter everywhere in my bag, and I do almost everything after I've built a quad from my phone now. And there's no reason you can't either, because you can flash Express LRS, you can flash BlueJay and configure 8-bit ESCs, and you can configure everything about Betaflight 4.3.1 on the SpeedyBee app. So if you're not using it, don't worry about having to get the little adapter thing they sell. You can do it without that. Totally go get it. But when it comes down to it, at least we have options on the market in this price range, below 80 bucks for an entire stack. And you can build a 5-inch quad on this. The amp ratings are big enough to run anything with 5-inch props reasonably, unless you're some kind of crazy racer or you have a 1,000-gram 5-inch quad for some ridiculous reason that I can't even comprehend. You can run these things and get your quad in the air just fine, especially with the BMI-270 gyro. A lot of people get concerned about the F411 or the F405 processor. Yes, the F405 processor is a little bit faster than the F411, but with the BMI-270 gyro, your PID frequency is going to be 3.25K instead of 4K. So it's not a big deal if you're running a slower processor, because your PID loop is going to be much slower, and you're going to be running something like DShot 300 or 600 on it, not DShot 1200. So you don't need crazy amounts of processing power unless you need more UARTs. And if you are concerned about UARTs, the SpeedyBee has you covered. I mean, 4 available UARTs on a budget board with still retaining Bluetooth connectivity. Come on, what else are you trying to do with your quad? Seriously. But it's just great we do have these options in 2022, and we don't have to spend a fortune to build a quad. And that's actually why I'm looking at these, because I am going to build a budget quad that costs less than $250, but flies like a premium quad. And this is going to be in it. This is my choice. But at the end of the day, if you like the T-Motor option, it's available too. It's just as many places as the SpeedyBee. I'll take the SpeedyBee any day, but if you're just a diehard T-Motor person, there's an option out there for you as well. And I'm going to link both of these in my description below if you want to pick one of them up. They will not be affiliate links because I don't have any affiliate links and I don't feel like getting any affiliate links. I don't want to get paid for you picking things in a store. So just go buy them. I'm going to put my favorite stores, and if you want to buy them there, that's fine. If not, go to Google and find them yourself and buy them there. As long as you pick something up to get in the air, because in 2022, you still can do it for a reasonable price. Well, I hope this has been very helpful, and if it has, please give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I would appreciate it. If today's not your day and you feel like I haven't earned your subscription, that's fine. I'll just keep making these videos. Some of them will be more stupid than this one, and maybe someday you'll feel like it. But if not, that's okay too. And if you really, really like this stuff, which I wouldn't understand if you did, but I'm going to say it anyway, I have a Patreon. And if you go there and you sign up for different tiers, you might just get your name photoshopped on the bacon once a week in my longer videos. And, you know, I like to do it as an embarrassment, but you might enjoy just seeing your name on some bacon in a random Photoshop scene. But anyway, that's all I have. So until next time, stay greasy, buy some budget stacks, and I'll catch you later. Oh, I'm so sick. I'm so sick right now. I am doing this while sick. I am trying my best to not appear sick, but I am nonetheless sick. So the show must go on, FPV pilots. Let's get back to work.